The backstory we all wanted has finally arrived. Kirishima, the unbreakable Red Riot, finally had some of his past revealed. We knew it was going to happen eventually because of the way Horikoshi's been slowly building up Kirishima these past couple of, chapters, but we finally got that. But surprisingly, Mina popped up in the flashback, which was whoa, wow, the way she popped up and she was like a big spotlight in Kirishima's middle school life definitely surpassed anything I expected from her character, at the very least the relationship and how Kirishima, viewed Mina as a person. So, one of the big things about this flashback is to showcase one of the things that have been relatively obvious these past few chapters that we've seen focus on him, is that he lacks confidence. And many of you might automatically be able to connect the dots here. Kirishima lacking confidence is everything that was going on with Sun Eater. Sun Eater lacked confidence as well. He was someone that was gifted with a very incredible quirk. He lacked the confidence to be able to use it properly, and he just thought he couldn't accomplish anything, which we saw his development take place in the previous chapters. Now, the big thing about this chapter, what sets Sun Eater's situation apart from Kirishima's, is that Sun Eater's quirk is very, very flashy, and it's something that could be used in so many situations. This man could become an incredible hero, one of the best heroes that the world has ever seen. But Kirishima, he is someone that is very aware of what he is. He has a quirk that is very dull, very boring, and also, overall, the way he looks isn't flashy either. When you look at someone like Sun Eater, his design to his outfit to, the way he can use his quirk ability, he has stuff that just makes him very flashy. He can stand out. While someone like Kirishima, that also lacks, self-confidence, his quirk ability doesn't really stand out because there's many out there that are very similar to him that have the ability to harden their bodies in certain ways, like, Tetsu, for instance. And that's how Kirishima is. He's someone that has that type of ability where he could just make his body a little bit harder. For instance, just, harden up to where he can block damage. And it's nothing really spectacular about it. I mean, on paper, when you look at it, it's very simplistic. It's nothing like, holy shit, that's fucking ridiculous. It's not like that. It's not like Sun Eater. And when he says his ability is very dull, very boring, I agree with that. I do. Many of us, I think, can agree with that. Let's be real here. We can. But the big thing is, though, it's not the fact that he's dull, he's boring. It's the fact of what was the root of his problem. And that is what the flashback was for. So, from what we could see in the flashback, in Kirishima's middle school days, he was someone that had a high spirit. He had the spirit about him to where he believed in justice, he wanted to be a hero, he still had his idol that he looked up to, and he was someone that wanted to be able to face villains. But over time, and other people part of his school, they thought he was weak, he couldn't do anything, and they picked on him, or they just, shoved him aside like he was nothing. So Kirishima couldn't really even stop school bullies from bullying a kid. He couldn't do anything. So he realized that he was kind of powerless. But on top of that, though, there was a real critical situation that happened one day, and the flashback reveals it, that there was one point where these two girls from his school, they were just, walking along, and then this villain type character, which actually has popped up twice before in the previous parts of Boku no Hero Academia, FYI. And, the entire part with Stain, he kind of inspired a bunch of villains, and I think you pronounce his name Dabi or whatever, I'm probably saying his name, wrong, but basically, in the entire panel, I think it was chapter 54? I think it's 54. I forget the exact chapter. I'll have to look at my videos and all that, Boku no Hero, because I remember doing a very big review on that chapter, but there was a big overview of, a bunch of different villains that, was inspired by Stain and what he did, and one of the big villains that never really popped up yet was this villain that looked like a big stone-ass tall monster creature, and we've never really seen that dude ever pop up again, and it seems like the dude that was covered and all that most likely is that dude, and also he popped up once before. So the way it's looking is that this person is going to be someone very critical in the future of Boku no Hero Academia, just Horikoshi is yet to use his character in the ongoing story. But getting back on topic, though, This dude walks up to these two girls from, Kirishima's school, and he's asking for directions. Obviously, the girls are very scared. They don't know what to fucking do. This man's getting irritated, so he kind of cracks the wall right above them. It looks like he's about to slaughter these two girls, so a typical villain. And Kirishima, he notices this. He's like the only one that really becomes aware of this. Nobody else is around. No major hero is around to stop this. And he's like, holy shit, of all the times, like, there's no heroes on patrol, something like this happens. And he's like, you know what? I need to do something. And he's thinking all of this in his mind. He's thinking about he needs to jump in, he needs to do something, he needs to save these girls from this dude. And as he is thinking this, you just see the sweat going down his face. You see this man just thinking really hard, and when he realizes, like, wait, why am I not moving? Why can't I move? That was fear inside of him. The man couldn't move because he was scared. He was scared of what was happening and what, he probably couldn't do, and his lack of self-confidence because he couldn't do anything. It wasn't just the fact he was scared of the dude. The fear he felt within him was the fear of what has been building up throughout his entire childhood. People saying he's useless, he's weak, he's someone that can't really do anything. And so all of this came rushing inside of his head, and he couldn't perform what he wanted to do. And so he failed. He stood still while these two girls were being terrorized, and Mina had to step in, and she had to give this dude wrong directions before he could walk off and leave these girls alone. And one of the big things I want to point out about that moment was the fact that Mina, she didn't use her quirk ability. She didn't use her quirk ability to make this man give up or run away or whatever. She just said some certain little few things, and then he just walked off. And so what this is saying is that if Kirishima would have walked in and said something very similar, it would have been handled. He didn't need his quirk to be able to settle that situation. He just needed to walk over there and say something, but he did not do that, which separated and showed the difference between him and Mina in the middle school time. And that's when Kirishima realized how much he was as a failure. He was someone that couldn't really be a hero. He lacked the heart to do so. He couldn't even go in and just say a few things. He was going to let those girls possibly die because he was just so scared. So Kirishima had this complex he formed, and he's carried it with him ever since. And you can see that he's carried it with him to this very point in his life. And the chapter represents him trying to overcome that thing that he has been plagued with since a very young age. When he steps in front of Fat Gum in the last chapter, and he took the hits, that was character development. It was actually him being scared, but at the same time, he was scared that he would make the same mistake once again. So he jumped in, disregarding his own well-being, his own life, just to make sure that he didn't do the exact same mistake. And so he had, like, in a certain way, he had madness inside of him like Izuku. He just didn't care about his own self in that given moment. He jumped in and just wanted to make sure that Fat Gum was going to be okay, because no one else was there to jump in. There was no Mina around to jump in and save Fat Gum, so he knew he had to do something, and so he didn't want to make that mistake, but make it even worse than it already was and how it was in the past. So that is why he jumped in. So that face we saw Kirishima with in the last chapter, when it looked like he gave up all hope, that actually was his real face. He wasn't faking. And at the beginning of the chapter, it's implied that it was a big elaborate plot, like, Kirishima and Fat Gum were doing, and the villains believed that maybe Kirishima was acting. Like, he was acting with his face, and he looked like he was scared, but he really wasn't. But in reality, he was scared. He was frightened, and he was tensing up and didn't know what to do. But because of what he saw, he did not want what happened in his past to happen again. So that is why he stepped in. Now, besides all of those things, let's talk about the next part after that. Once he failed to even help out these two girls and Mina had to step in, he looked at some articles. These articles focus on Bakugo and Izuku. Now, according to my understanding, I could be wrong here, but I believe it's focused on those two because of the way the articles are written. Basically, in those certain panels, it states that there was a middle school boy that was holding off a villain, which is kind of like Bakugo, and eventually he was captured, and then the other middle schooler came in and then helped out, which was Izuku. And when he was reading this article, we know there's a little bit more details in this article. There had to be a lot more details to the article about, for instance, Izuku being quirkless, stepping in, and, stopping this villain or holding off the villain until All Might arrived. It was very inspiring. It's a very inspiring story when you look at something like that for anyone that is probably quirkless and thinks they can't become a hero. But the big thing about that is that when Kirishima looked at that news article and he saw this middle schooler step up and try to save his friend, and in the article most likely dived in a little bit more details how this kid didn't have a quirk, he's like, I'm fucking useless. What the fuck is wrong with me? That's what he's thinking. Like, If this person can step in without a quirk and do that, I have no excuse. I have no fucking excuse. And so when that man saw that, you could kind of say that Kirishima almost didn't become what he is today thanks to Izuku. Izuku almost ended that man's career. Now, like I said, it's not Izuku's fault. It's not, because Izuku had no idea that would happen. But if you look at it like that, we gotta look at what All Might has done to everybody around the world. All Might has inspired so many heroes and frightened so many villains, and also inspired villains as well. Look at Stain. All Might is someone that is the pinnacle, and he is someone that just holds so much weight. And we know through the origin stories through Bakugo, Todoroki, and Izuku that they all three were inspired by All Might. They became what they are today thanks to All Might. He was that symbol. And we also know that All Might, just like how he was a symbol for people to become a hero, he was also a symbol that also drove them to become a villain. And in this case, what happened here was the negative effect. Izuku, he had a very similar effect to what All Might did. For instance, All Might inspired people, while Izuku, instead of inspiring someone, he made them feel negativity. They felt like they were pointless, which that is what Kirishima felt, and why he almost gave up his entire dream. And when you see him just scratching off the names of the school he wants to go to, it represents the fact that he was just done at that moment. He just felt like he couldn't do anything, and so he had a pointless future, and most likely he could have went down a wrong path because of that. Now, we don't know necessarily what happens. I'm looking at the panel here. We don't know what really happens after the final page, because obviously this is part 1 to his flashback. We don't really know what happened between him saying, like, fuck it, I'm not going to the school UA, and then him going to the exam, the entrance exam. We don't really know what happened between those 2 points. What made him go through such a radical shift? We do know from this chapter, in terms of the storyline, it's very, very close to the time when Izuku went to the entrance, exam. And so the radical change that Kirishima went through is just something that really makes me question something. Like, how did he learn to use his quirk ability so well? Because from what we can see from the chapter is that his quirk ability isn't anything amazing. Like, he didn't have a lot of control over it like he does now. And so, how did he manage to control it that well? But also, what made him change so much to change his opinion? Someone had to talk to him to make him want to continue being a hero. So that is what I'm very curious about, and that is what Horikoshi needs to dive into, because that is a big blank right there. What happened between the end of this chapter to the entrance exam at the beginning of the series? How did he change? So, overall, the flashback was a really nice insight to his character, and to see how things could have went really wrong if something didn't happen, something didn't change his mind. Now, one of the big things I want to talk about, which is kind of a negative part about this, honestly, I'm on the fence about it, but I could see why some might complain about this chapter and say the flashback felt very out of place, because the chapter starts off with Fat Gum initiating with his punch and all that. And last chapter ended off with a crazy cliffhanger, like, holy shit, that's badass. Fat Gum is now Slim Gum or whatever. This man looks freaking crazy. And then the flashback starts. So we don't even get to see the conclusion of what Fat Gum was doing. It just shifts right over into a flashback, which I felt like could really ruin the movement or pacing of this part of the fight, because the way it just came in like this, it kind of makes the overall moment of Fat Gum a little bit less interesting, because we have to wait another week to see the conclusion of whatever is about to happen. So I guess the flashback could have been inserted a little bit better, but maybe I just don't see the main point of the flashback yet. I mean, maybe if I was to reread it and think about the structure of the fight and all that, maybe the overall way the flashback was positioned in the story might make a lot of sense. But for now, though, I don't know. I felt like the way the flashback was incorporated in this is probably not the best place to put it. Now, it needed to happen, but I felt like it should have been saved for after the fight was done. But maybe it's to add more emotions to what this fight is about in the first place. Who knows? So yeah, that's about it when it comes to the latest chapter of Boku no Hero Academia. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.